The Wolves had a 62-point performance, and they blew it. We'll talk about how it happened, and is it a symptom of a greater problem on today's Minnesota Basketball Party.
This is Locked On Sports Minnesota podcast. It's endless Minnesota Timberwolves talk with the diverse voices of your local experts. It's time for the Minnesota Basketball Party on the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Welcome in, everybody. It's Wolves Talk every Wednesday here on Locked On Sports Minnesota with the Minnesota Basketball Party. Thank you for watching us on the Locked On Sports Minnesota YouTube channel or catching us on the 24/7 YouTube live stream. Please subscribe to get notified when we're doing a show. It definitely helps the program grow. Also, thank you for listening to us in the Locked On Wolves audio feed wherever you get your podcasts, as well as the SiriusXM app. And we're also available on Amazon Fire and Roku. Lots of ways to watch and listen. Today's show is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place a $5 bet. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get started. Well, fellas, we're still dealing with the fallout of the Wolves squandering a 62-point Karl-Anthony Towns performance. Fourth quarter leads getting away, becoming an alarming trend. And even Joel Embiid goes and outshines Cat on his 62-point night with 70 points himself. We'll compare the two big men on today's show. But let's meet the panel with our opening tip.
Hey, what's up? It's Reggie Wilson from Care 11, and the Wolves are a very unserious basketball team. I have tried to defend them on this podcast, but what Chris Finch said, he was right.
I'm Bud Beacon, host of the daily Locked On Wolves podcast, and contrary to Reggie, I don't think the sky is falling. The fourth quarter issues are real, and we'll talk about that, but the sky's not absolutely falling on this team. They are a true contender in the West.
I'm Jack Borman. I'm editor-in-chief at Canasupis, co-host of the Locked On Wolves postcast with my man Luke Inman. And I'm going to talk a little bit about a 5-letter word that Timberwolves fans should get familiar with here.
Well, my name is Ron Johnson, former Gophers wide receiver, NFL wide receiver, basketball enthusiast. I'm also a great hooper. And I'm going to talk about how not only did the Timberwolves disrespect the game of basketball, but they deserve to be the number 2 team right now.
And I'm Sam Ekstrom, and I'm just trying not to flop when somebody charges at me. On today's show, we've got plenty to get to, but let's start with the big story. Monday's game, Karl-Anthony Towns scores 62. And I would say for 3 quarters, guys, this was all going according to plan. The lead was expanding. Cat almost had 60 through 3 quarters. I believe he had 58. They led by as many as 18 and 15 points going into the fourth. It felt like a cruise control win where Karl-Anthony Towns could go put up a big franchise record number. Now, he did get the franchise record, but at the cost of everybody forgetting how to play basketball in the fourth quarter and forgetting how to play defense in particular, because the Charlotte Hornets shot like 60% and beat the Minnesota Timberwolves and then sold off Terry Rozier and everything. Now they're blowing it up. But Reggie, what are your most meaningful takeaways from this collapse? Because it sounds like we've already got two sides of this coin. We've got those that are saying this was an abomination, disrespectful, egregious. And then we've got the RELAX crowd over there with Jack Borman. So Reggie, where do you fall?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think like the sky is falling, but I do think that was a very indicative performance of where the Wolves are at this point in their basketball journey. You know, I think Finch said that they were immature, and I think that was the big part of it. You know, we saw what happened with Embiid on the same night, and it just seemed like, especially in that fourth quarter, they were forcing it too much. You know, they were trying to throw it into Cat's going, you know, taking on double teams, trying to go 1-on-4 on that second to last possession, and I'm like, what is going on? Like, just hoop, like play the game. And it turned into like some hero ball. Like, Cat thought he was Kobe down the stretch, and he's just taking all these crazy shots. Granted, they were going in earlier in the game, but it really just they kind of got away from who exactly they are. You know, you get 9 points from Ant. The bench really doesn't do much. Like, it was Cat and the Pips out there. That's how it kind of felt. And nobody else really kind of impacted the game the way that we're used to seeing them impact the game. And it just blew up in their faces. I mean, you look at this stat line and you allow 28 points to Miles Bridges. You got 27 from Miller. And they just start shooting the lights out in the fourth quarter. And that was just a very inexplicable loss. You don't have a game like that where one of your stars scores that many points and you lose. It's just like it kind of almost nullifies. That'll always be in history. Karl-Anthony Towns breaks the franchise record for points in a losing performance. It's not. It feels like Timberwolves basketball from like the last several years that I've been paying attention to them. It's just not the thing that you want to be known for. Cat is now on this like esteemed list, you know, with MJ and like all these other guys who have scored 62 plus points in a losing effort. And I think I tweeted like, it's good company, but it's not really a list you want to be on.
Yeah, I saw this list. It's like scoring 60 plus in the loss, Wilt Chamberlain 10 times, and then like 5 other guys who did it once. So it's not a very long list. And it really was the perfect storm of Charlotte getting incredibly hot. Karl-Anthony Towns, I thought he forced, I think you allow for a little bit of heat checking. He probably gave away 3 or 4 possessions, though, in that fourth quarter that they actually desperately needed there down the stretch because he was hunting, because he wasn't playing in the flow of the game. He was going at people. And if it's Joel Embiid, I do think he probably gets some of those foul calls. I do think he got fouled, especially on the last play, but also you got to play you got to play basketball. You can't be that reckless. Ben Beacon, what do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I think all of the above is true, right? And I would push back a little bit with the introduction assertion, Sam, that things are going according to plan. Certainly, they were up 16 or 17 or something going to the fourth quarter, and it was close enough where Cat still had to play. So there was kind of that sweet spot where everybody's like, let's see if Cat can get 70 or 75 or whatever. But the perimeter defense was horrific all night, and that's kind of where this starts. And yes, Charlotte did get hot. They did make some contested shots late. Brandon Miller was crazy in this game. But it was really the perimeter defense that was so awful. But I mean, like, I wouldn't also, I at the same time wouldn't say that was necessarily the worst part of the collapse, because clearly this is the best defensive team in the league. There's no question. We have a big enough body of work now, even with these stats, like the gap between them and the next best team in defensive rating and opponent effective field goal percentage is crazy. The Wolves have a legitimately great defense. They really do. This was just a really bad game. And while I would still argue that their defense is great, it's possible to have a terrible game now and again. And it's also possible for it to come on a night where some of the larger issues that have been going on all season, like the fourth quarter offense specifically, that to me is the most concerning thing. And yeah, the Cat thing is certainly part of it. I locked on Wolves on, I guess it would have been Tuesday. I went back through the first part of the fourth quarter, like the first 5 or 6 possessions when they were up double digits weren't actually bad possessions. It was like they ran a play to get Cat an open through corner 3. He just missed it. Jordan McLaughlin missed a wide open 3-point shot. Cat took somebody to the basket. He wasn't double teamed. He missed it, but Rudy cleaned it up and got an offensive rebound. Like, they had 5-6 possessions in a row that were fine. They just missed some open shots. And then that's when it was like, shoot, nothing's working. Let's go back to Cat, and he'll force it. And it's a big night for him anyway. And that's when things kind of got off the rails. So it was really the most concerning thing to me was the inability to pull out of a tailspin once they were already in it, / the fourth quarter offense, which you've seen so often kind of rear its ugly head this season. I said something to this effect on Twitter. Like, both can be true, right? Like, they can get screwed by the refs on the final possession, which they did, and they can force the ball to Cat a little bit too much in this game, which they did, but also have some other things that happen. And I think in the broader picture, it doesn't mean that, this team is in big trouble or anything like that. And there's a lot of reasons for that I've talked about in Locked On Wolves. But in this game specifically, it was the perimeter defense. It was the lack of execution on the fourth quarter offense. And between the two, it's the fourth quarter offense that's a legitimate problem, moving forward. I'm not as worried about them also giving up 130 to like another terrible team on this road trip. Like, I don't think that's going to be a regular occurrence.
All right, Jack, we're dying to know your 5-letter word. Did I predict it correctly? Is it an RELAX situation?
It sure is, Sam. Yeah, I just couldn't care less that they lost this game. Frankly.
Wow.
Chris
Finch cares a lot. Chris Finch cares a lot. Why don't you care?
That's good for Chris Finch. It's his job to care. It is not my job to care or to be emotionally invested one way or the other. I thought it was funny more than anything. Look, from being around these guys in the locker room, the most important thing that I think fans need to remember is these guys are human. All of us show up to work, everybody listening, all 5 of us, and there are days where we are not our 100% best selves, right? Like we don't have our A game every single game, and like that's okay. We're all human beings. I realize that, Ron, you don't make $51 million or $45 million, or none of us do, and those players do, and that's totally fine. But at the end of the day, like, this is a weird once in a season game where a guy goes absolutely bananas. Everybody on the team is having fun. It is mid-January against a terrible team. Everybody in there is just trying to get to the All-Star break at this point. Everybody in the Wolves locker room, everybody in the Hornets locker room, everybody in every NBA locker room at this point is just trying to get to the All-Star break. And, I just have zero issue that they wanted to, help their guy have a historic night because, we can all sit around here and say that, stats don't matter or these guys shouldn't care about this stuff. But guess what? Like all these NBA players care about this stuff and they want to support their teammates, and they tried to support Karl the best they could. And you know what? They kind of played a dumb game and won a dumb prize. And sometimes you have to do that to learn that, like, all right, like next time this happens, like maybe we shouldn't necessarily try this again. But and if you want to get picky, you wish that at some point you just kind of abandon this scoring chase and try to focus on winning the game. But like Anthony Edwards said, like it's hard to flip that switch. And this game just has like no similarities to a game that matters. Mike Conley didn't play. And then you also factor in like the Hornets are terrible. Like all these NBA teams like bring a more focused effort against really good teams compared to like poor teams. And we can talk about how the Wolves need to do a better job of that. Guess what? They're 11-3 against teams under 500. Last year, they were 17-18 against teams under 500. Like they've taken a huge step forward in that area. They've already proven that they are more than capable of taking care of teams that are below 500. And at the end of the day, the NBA is an entertainment product. And get mad at me all you want, but I was thoroughly entertained throughout that game. I had a wonderful time watching that game in the first 3 quarters and watching Karl do his thing. And I had a wonderful time laughing at what in my mind was just a pretty funny collapse because, like, Chris Finch said and Reggie said, like, they absolutely deserved what happened. But that doesn't change my stance that I just don't think that this game or how they performed in the fourth quarter specifically really has much of any bearing on how we should think about this team moving forward. They were the butt of a joke for the day, which I think is totally fine. But, I also think people on some level need to realize that this is like a very unique circumstance that caused a result that I just don't really think matters all that much going forward.
Yeah, we'll get into these chronic fourth quarter collapses before the show is over, but Ron Johnson, give it to us.
Yeah, I'm going to, Your Honor, I would like to address Jack as a hostile witness on the stand. Erroneous, as my guy Vince Vaughn would say. Erroneous on all counts. Here's where I go with this. Yes, it was entertaining. Yes, it was fun to see Karl-Anthony Towns go for 62. We also saw Joel Embiid go for 70, and they won the game. You know the big difference? Tyrese Maxey was dialed in the entire game while Joel Embiid was going at it. So he was always ready for the kick-out pass. He was all ready to drive if they were going to double team. He was ready for, Joel Embiid knew, like, hey, if I'm getting triple team, I'm going to kick it out. That's what frustrates me about Karl-Anthony Towns in that moment. That's why I think Chris Finch is like saying they disrespected the game, because there's one thing to be on a heater. Like I've done it myself at the gym. Like, I can get on a go every once in a while where if we're playing the 17, I'm going to score 15. But also in the next game, if I miss like 3 shots in a row, I'm done. I'm passing it. I'm waiting. I'm taking easier layups. I'm not worried about shooting deep threes. And that's what frustrates me about Karl-Anthony Towns, to be a veteran, to be a leader, and not realize at some point you're forcing shots for no reason. Like, whether you score 50 or whether you score 62, at the end of the day, the only thing that matters is getting that ring. That's the only thing that matters. Like, if you can walk away with that ring, that's all that matters. Is anybody going to care about a 62-point game later? No. Why? Because you lost. Now you're going to be in this list of players that have done it and lost. Great. But did you win a ring? Like Dan Marino. We don't even talk about Dan Marino, and he's one of the best quarterbacks ever in the NFL, and he never gets brought up in the GOAT conversation because he didn't win. You have to win to be considered a GOAT, and that's what's going on right now. You talk about Kevin Durant. You could talk about Steph Curry. Kevin Durant said, why aren't you guys putting me in the car? Because you never actually went out and won it without Steph Curry. That's why people are talking about you like that. LeBron did it. Steph did it. Like, that Jordan did it. Isaiah Thomas, they hate on Isaiah Thomas. They just don't like us in Detroit. But when you think about that, Karl-Anthony Towns, Anthony Edwards, somebody, and maybe Mike Conley, that's the problem with not having Mike Conley in that game. I guarantee Mike Conley eventually gets him back under control. Like, yo, bruh. You missed like 5. You're traveling, running people over. Like, I got you. Just get in the post. Let's play our game. You got 55. Let's relax. Let's relax and try to go win this game. So I do like your 5-letter word, Jack. I would have used it to the players. Relax. Let's go win this game. This might not be your night. Because what I don't want to see is Anthony Edwards get on a heater, and then that happens again, where everybody's standing around watching him like they're at the pickup gym. In my opinion, I agree with Chris Finch. It was disrespectful at some point. At some point, you have to realize you're still in a basketball game, and now that's why you're not the number 1 seed anymore, and they deserve it.
We are going to get into these fourth quarter collapses, why they're happening, and we'll do a little Embiid cat side by side, 2 of the better big men in today's game. But a couple words before we get back to that on the Minnesota Basketball Party. Today's show brought to you by Hungry Root. Whether you're braving the cold or dealing with crowds, grocery shopping this time of year is the worst. Why not stay home and let Hungry Root handle it? With Hungry Root, you can kickstart a week of healthy eating and get groceries delivered right to your door. Helps your health, and it's also great value. It's the easiest way to get fresh, high-quality food delivered to your door, healthy groceries, and simple recipes all in one place. Take a fun, short quiz, and Hungry Root will get to know you, your goals, and how you like to eat. They'll ask the flavors you like, the appliances you use. Then they'll keep your needs and preferences top of mind. Start building your cart with delicious recipes and all the grocery needs for the week. Goes beyond your grocery haul with thousands of easy recipes that put your groceries to good use before they get forgotten about in the back of your fridge. I hate that. Spend less time meal planning, shopping, and cooking, more time enjoying healthy food. Right now, Hungry Root is offering Locked On NBA listeners 40% off your first delivery and free veggies for life. Go to hungryroot.com/lockedon, 40% off your first delivery and get your free veggies. That's hungryroot.com/lockedon. Don't forget to use our link so they know that we sent you. We're also presented by eBay Motors. Passion, drive, patience. What brings home the winning trophy is also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle, level it up to peak performance, from superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, and more. Whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has got you covered. Over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die. You'll always find exactly what you're looking for. And with the eBay Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time or your money back. Because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. eBay Guaranteed Fit only available to U.S. customers. All right, so Jack and Ben, calmer heads here. Reggie and Ron, a little fired up. I'm probably more on the Reggie-Ron team about being upset about this blown game, because it is symptomatic of a trend that's bothersome now. Mavericks, Celtics, Thunder, and now Hornets. 4 games firmly within your grasp that you've let slip away with ineptitude offensively in the fourth quarter, late in games. I know 2 of those games I want to say, no Mike Conley. Who cares? Be better. You've got other players on the team that can handle the ball. Stop turning it over. So let's go to Jack first. Why is it happening? Why are the Wolves gumming up in the fourth quarter when they have games in hand?
Yeah, I frankly, you're gonna hate me, but I frankly don't think that they have a fourth quarter problem right now. If you just want to look at their fourth quarter, you want to look at their turnover percentage by month, by quarter. You want to look at their net rating, rank by month. In the first month of the season, they were 24th net rating in the fourth quarter. Second month of the year, they were 15th. Third month, 12th. This month, 14th. Like they've been a pretty average fourth quarter team. And while yes, they've lost a few games in the fourth quarter in recent, moments, I still think that, when you look at the Boston game, pretty unique circumstances in that game with the weird travel thing. They don't have Mike Conley. Everybody's exhausted. You're playing on the road in Boston against a team that hadn't lost at home to that point. And against Oklahoma City, that was really the only game that I am frankly, concerned about or think carries a lot of weight, because that is a caliber of team that you'd see in the playoffs. That is a game that everybody got up for and everybody was locked in for. And I think was, I guess, more problematic when you think about the turnovers, and that they had 7 turnovers in that fourth quarter alone that became 8 Thunder points. And I think a huge part of that problem is a lot of the Timberwolves' best scorers, whether it be Karl or Ant or Naz Reid or Jaden even, just drive too much into crowds. They drive where there's defenders, and none of them are good enough to consistently make defenses pay for, putting 2, 3, 4 guys on the ball. And then when those guys do get in positions to pass, I don't think the guys around them do a good enough job of moving without the basketball to present an option for them to pass the ball to. And that's when you get some of these turnovers that, aren't just turnovers, but they're live ball turnovers, which are steals going the other way, which, result in points and free throws and all the rest of it. So I think the biggest thing for the Timberwolves is spacing. And I think, it's been more encouraging in the first half of games that Karl-Anthony Towns has been in the corner, at least with the starting lineup, which, gives Anthony Edwards and Rudy Gobert kind of more room to work in that 2-man game. And then once they, spray the ball out to one of the corners, it just gets good ball movement going. So I think the biggest things are just stop driving into a crowd and get off the ball early and trust that it's going to come back to you. Because we all know that, way more than the average team in the NBA, that ball movement is pivotal for this team. I think they're 19-1 when they have at least 27 assists. Which is just really indicative of when the Timberwolves move the ball, their offense is great. Is as good as it can be. And when they don't move the ball, it's pretty tough to watch. And that Oklahoma City game was an example of they just didn't move the ball. And, it's just really tough when, everybody kind of gets tight and starts missing shots. And then, like Ron said, he misses 2 or 3 and he gets off of it. Right. So players just kind of got to follow that and be willing to move it and trust that it'll come back and find them. But again, I'm not all that concerned, just because it's kind of who they've been all year. It's not really something that is now suddenly changing.
I'm trying to find the John Krasinski tweet. I thought it was John Krasinski who tweeted about their turnover issues. Maybe it wasn't, although I did find the Karl-Anthony Towns stat on the John Krasinski feed, and now I lost that too. But it had the Wilt Chamberlain 10, George Gervin, Devin Booker, Michael Jordan, and David Thompson. Those are the other players to score 60 and lose. But Ron Johnson, fourth quarter collapses. Why are they happening?
Well, I mean, part of it though is when you're a winner and you've been winning at the clip they've done. Now let's take it back, because again, I can be my own. I can defend my own sentiment. 30-13 versus a 10-31 team they lost to in the Hornets. They were 9-31. So when you've won 30 games already before the All-Star break, you have a different feeling. Like early in this season, we all picked a number, 50, 52, 48. This is a team that theoretically could win 60 games. And nobody would bat an eye because they've been playing that way. Like they were on pace to win 60 games. And so when you think about that too, I always talk about the report card. they always start out well, or they always have a great third quarter. But then what do guys do? I always go back to Michael Jordan. I hate to do it because it's an impossible person to go at, or Kobe Bryant, because I think somebody was just talking about Kobe's 81-point game. Oh yeah, LeCap himself, LeBron, the liar, saying that he knew Kobe was going to go for 70, and then he knew Kobe was going to go for 80 at the point he saw. But why? Because people can see in Kobe's eyes in the fourth quarter that it's damn near over if it's close, because Kobe was going to take over. Same with Michael Jordan. Any game that was close, people look to Michael Jordan. If you look at the Timberwolves right now and the game is close, I hate to say this, we're not looking at Karl-Anthony Towns like, go do it, big fella. You got this. Like, we're not. We don't see Karl-Anthony Towns as that killer in the fourth quarter. Now, is it Anthony Edwards? I personally think so. But when you're young and you have a guy older than you, a couple guys older than you, it's sometimes tough. I forgot what Michael Jordan said, but I think it wasn't until people have to remember, Michael didn't do this until like 88, 89, 90, 91, 92. Like, that's when he started realizing, after he got his butt kicked by the Pistons, all right, I gotta be a leader now. And so maybe this is the early butt kicking. It wasn't a butt kicking. It was just embarrassing that the Timberwolves needed for Anthony Edwards maybe to sit back and reflect and say, maybe it is my show. Maybe I should have took over in the fourth quarter. Great, Cat. You had a great game, but let me do what I do. I'm rested. I mean, I haven't scored much. I think he had like 8 points at that point. Let me take over. And that's what they're going to need. I think the fourth quarter mindset is the problem. They're going in the fourth quarter the same way they see the other three quarters. The fourth quarter is you got to kill or be killed. And it's got to be Anthony Edwards in my opinion.
Yeah, it's interesting because I tend to agree with Jack. I think, honestly, this is just the team just kind of figuring things out. And they've had more good games in the fourth quarter than they've had bad. And a couple of those, like, it's so funny, before the game, the other night against the Hornets, when we found out that Mike Conley wasn't playing, I was like, oh, shoot, here we go. And honestly, I think he would have been necessary because he's kind of like the adult in the room, amongst like all the kids, and they're doing whatever. He's just like, hey, cut that out. The true point guard out there to really just kind of get things going and get things on track. And when he's not out there, I think it is tough for the Wolves to really kind of lock in the way that they should. And look, I think that's part of it, but I also just agree with Jack. Like, I think these are just some growing pains of a team that's learning how to win consistently and do it well. And I think we have more games of them doing well in the fourth quarter than not this season. And so I think we kind of I'll kind of tend to go towards the games that they were doing good at. And so I think as the season goes along and they try to figure out, who they are and how they're going to win basketball games, I think they'll continue to mature and they'll continue to figure things out and find their way. And these games, I know they suck, from a fan standpoint, because they're like, oh, like, can this Wolves team just get it together and just be good when they're supposed to be good? And I think that's coming. I think that's something that they are striving towards and things that they are hoping to continue to improve on. But honestly, in a long season like this, games like those are going to happen. And, here it is. Now they've lost their second straight for just the second time this season. And I think long 82 game season, man. So when things like this happen, you kind of want to put it in a microscope and say, like, oh man, what's the issue here? What's going on? But I think these things just kind of happen, and I think they'll figure things out and get better from this. But it's surely when they lose a game like they did the other night against Charlotte, that just kind of leaves a bad taste in fans' mouths. But I think they'll figure it out. Ben.
Yeah, I mean, I think Reggie hit the nail on the head. Like, they have been fine in the fourth quarter for most of the year. Jack mentioned some numbers regarding that. I think the biggest thing for me is, like, we weren't talking about this when what's a different way to say this? They haven't lost a bunch of games like this to bad teams late, right? Like the only close late games they've lost to bad teams are this game and the Hornets game, or excuse me, the Raptors game in the first game of the season. All the other games that you listed at the start of this segment, Sam, were against good teams. I mean, Boston, no Conley, overtime game, back-to-back on the road. I know they're excuses, but like those are realities too, right? The Thunder game was as Jack said, a disappointing finish for sure. Turnovers were a massive issue in that game. But if you don't turn the ball over 20 or however many times before the fourth quarter, then it's not that close of a game anyway, because they outplayed the Thunder in a lot of other ways. The other close late games they've lost, the Dallas game, they're a good team, right? Like sometimes you just lose games to good teams late. And if this were a pattern, if this were happening frequently against subpar competition, I know it's the fourth quarter issues offensively and some of the turnover stuff are, that's generally a pattern, but they aren't losing these games close late to mediocre and bad teams consistently enough. I did on Locked On Wolves. I went back actually today's show, on Wednesday's show, and looked at like really big picture. And this is anecdotal, sure, but it's a pretty good argument against the sky is falling for this team. Like, I go back and look, like last year, the Nuggets went through a stretch where they lost 6 out of 8 in March, and they lost to like bad teams. Go back and look at the Warriors 2 years ago. They lost 3 or 4 straight games to non-playoff teams or teams that got swept in the first round of the playoffs in like February. So like this stuff happens. We're still talking about a team that hasn't lost more than 2 games in a row. They're not losing to bad teams consistently. We're going to talk about this road trip. If they lay an egg on this road trip, I think a week from now, we may be having a different conversation, but sitting here right now, the fourth quarter issues generally broadly are a problem in terms of turnovers, et cetera. But when you're talking about a problem for a team that's still a half game out of the first spot in the West and hasn't lost more than 2 games in a row all year, there's varying levels of problems, right? And so I think I don't think we should overstate what the issues are.
Coming up, we're going to compare our guy Karl-Anthony Towns and the 70-point scorer Joel Embiid, the defending MVP, since the two were compared on Monday with their big nights. That's coming up on the Minnesota Basketball Party. And our show is brought to you by FanDuel. The NFL regular season has wrapped up, but it's the playoffs. Championship weekend coming up. Super Bowl 2 weeks after that. Still time to get in the action at FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook, and NBA lines every night, of course. Minnesota Timberwolves in Washington tonight, favored by 11, minus 590 on the money line. Better not lose this one, guys. You can also bet plenty more at FanDuel, college basketball, NHL, and you can get $150 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place a $5 bet. That's new customers getting $150 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place a $5 bet. Live same-game parlays. Build out your parlays in the Parlay Hub. Find popular parlays that other people are doing, and plenty more. FanDuel.com/lockedon. FanDuel.com/lockedon. Make your first bet a layup. FanDuel, an official partner of the NFL. Thank you to our everydayers who watch all of our programming here at Locked On Sports Minnesota. Minnesota Football Party on Mondays and Thursdays. Ron Johnson Show on Tuesdays. And the Roundtable on Fridays with Julia Daniels, Reggie Wilson, Ron Johnson, and myself. Thanks so much for tuning in here on the Minnesota Basketball Party. Cat versus Embiid. The two were obviously compared on Monday. Cat scores 52. Embiid scores 70. Embiid is the defending MVP. He's a scoring title winner. What is holding Cat back from being Joel Embiid? Is it merely a volume thing? Embiid shoots a lot. If Cat shot that much, would he be Embiid? Would he be an MVP? What is the difference between these two generational big men? I'm curious because Ron and I were talking about this on Tuesday before your show, Ron. So, Ron, why don't you take the first crack?
Yeah, I'm quick. I mean, the quick answer is Embiid has been doing it at a more consistent clip. And I think that's the big difference. He's been consistent with how he scores. He's not trying to shoot threes all the time. And I think that's the difference. Cat, at his size, could be one of the most dominant power forwards in the game of basketball. I mean, if you think about Tim Duncan, back to the basket, learn the footwork. Akeem Olajuwon, back to the basket, learn the footwork, learn how to get through, tight spaces, use his strength to go up. Tim Duncan had one of the best, fundamentally sound jumpers off the backboard. I mean, we called him big fundamentals for that. Cat is kind of a wild card. He wants to be this Kentucky guard. He wants to shoot. And Calipari said, get your big ass down there on the block, and I'm going to make you a first-round draft pick. And what does Cat do? He does it. But he gets to the NBA, man, I could shoot, man. Like, stop disrespecting me, man. I could shoot. You are the biggest guy on the floor sometimes, and you want to shoot threes. And I think that's the difference. Embiid gets it at the block. He gets it at the top of the key. Even if he gets it at the three, his first movement is to drive. He's trying to figure out, how can I get closer? And I think that's the only difference. They're both really good. I would take either one on my team, but if I had to pick between the two, I'm taking Embiid because he plays within the scheme of his game more. Also, Karl-Anthony Towns has Rudy Gobert, who's already down there. Then he also has Anthony Edwards, who's a really good scorer. Whereas Embiid, he did play with James Harden. They were really good when he did it, but clearly Harden could feel it. Like, we have to go to Embiid every once in a while. So that's why Harden wanted to get out of there. So that's the only difference. But I think, I don't know, Embiid to me seems a little bit more polished when it comes to being a true big man. And Karl-Anthony Towns wants to be this guard.
Yeah, Embiid, he's got a little size or a little girth, I guess. They're the same height. Embiid's listed as 280 and does seem to get a lot of respect when he drives. He's become a very efficient two-point shooter, but nowhere near the three-point shooter that Karl-Anthony Towns is. So they are different players, certainly. But Reggie, what's your take?
Yeah, it's really what Ron said. I feel like it's interesting because Cat wants to get the calls that Embiid actually gets. And it's tough because just about every shot you see Cat take, especially if it's in the paint and he's driving and all that, like when he's running back down the floor, he's like, foul, that was a foul. I feel like we see him say it just about every time he goes back down the court. And he wants to get those calls, and Embiid gets all those calls. I think it's interesting too, like when you look at their game, sometimes it seems like Cat, when he drives, like there's a force like pulling him in the opposite direction sometimes. And when Embiid goes and decides that he wants to go to the rack, like there's nothing stopping him. He's got the Euro step, and like there's the biggest dude I've ever seen with the Euro step in my life. And he's much more efficient in the paint than Cat is. I think, Cat can catch and shoot, and that's fun. When you're on 2K and you got a big man and you're shooting threes, that's fun. And so like he's a fun big, but I think as far as like the skill set goes, I think what Embiid brings is a little bit more valuable just because he is more consistent when he's driving to the paint and he's getting calls and guys falling off of him and still finishing through contact and all those things. And, I think Cat just leaves a little bit to be desired in that regard. I think it's a tough comparison just because they do two different things. And it's interesting because, when Cat was doing his thing the other night, a lot of that was him shooting it lights out. And Embiid was kind of doing some dirty work in there, and Cat doesn't do a whole lot of the dirty work. And so I think it's a weird comparison to make just because they're not necessarily the same type of player, but I think they're both, they both find ways to help their teams in different ways. Embiid just kind of does it at an MVP level, and Cat, especially this year, I said the other night on Cat has kind of taken the passenger seat this season, and just kind of does what is needed of him on a night-to-night basis. And it was funny because, on Monday night, he just kind of took the wheel back, like, hey, this is my car, I'm driving it. And we don't see a whole lot of that from Cat. And funny enough, it happened in a losing effort. So it's like, I don't know how much more we'll see of Cat taking the wheel, but something like that shows, Embiid in a winning effort, Cat in a losing effort, kind of shows the difference between the two guys, and as unfair as that may sound.
Mm-hmm. Ben.
Yeah, I don't want to turn this into just a Embiid gets the calls and Cat doesn't, and Cat complains too much conversation, but like it's free throws. Like that's the number one thing. And also, by the way, going back to Ron's point, Cat actually shoots more shots inside 3 feet and from 3 to 10 feet. So slice it up however you want. Within 10 feet to the basket, Cat shoots a higher percentage of his shots from that area of the floor than Joel Embiid does. Embiid does so much work from the mid-range, And Cat just doesn't shoot that many mid-range jumpers, and actually hasn't been, well, certainly not nearly as good as Embiid from that range. But I mean, this year Cat's actually been decent from there. He just doesn't shoot the ball that much from the mid-range, which is a good thing. So Cat's actually, for the most part, the shot selection is good. Free throw rate, like, it's not close. I mean, Embiid shoots a historic amount of free throws, and everybody knows how much he didn't play early in his career, and even still how many fewer games he's playing. Like this season, he's played 10 less games than Cat. But for his career, Embiid has, so this is crazy. Cat's played in 127 more games than Joel Embiid, but Joel Embiid has attempted like 1,200 more free throws. I had the exact number and then I lost it. Hang on one sec. Embiid has attempted 4,300 free throws and Cat's at 2,900. So it's literally, what is that? 1,400 more free throws,
like 50% more,
less games.
Yeah.
So that's the biggest thing. And obviously there's a skill to that. I'm not saying Embiid gets the calls, Cat doesn't. That's part of it, but there is also a skill to drawing fouls, and Embiid is really, really good at doing that. He also attacks the basket a lot. It's something Cat could do a little bit more of. Embiid's just a generational talent, and talent-wise, Cat is too, but because of Embiid's shot selection and also, you know, the ability and the good fortune of getting to line as often as he does, that's where he makes a lot of hay, and that's why he's averaging just an ungodly, like, 36 points per game so far this year.
Yeah, I think just, you know, I was going to say, you know, some similar things that Ben was. But going back to what Ron said, I think the biggest difference to me, just in terms of their actual play, is I think Joel Embiid uses his strength a lot more effectively than Karl-Anthony Towns does. Karl-Anthony Towns, there's no way he's the same height as Joel Embiid. He's probably 2.5 inches shorter than Joel Embiid, despite what they're listed at. And he's like 45 pounds lighter than Embiid. And that really does make a huge difference when you're comparing the two, especially playing a similar position. But I think Joel Embiid also is a much more fluid athlete than Karl. I think you see the herky-jerkiness of Karl's kind of play and how he tries to draw fouls. And I do think that plays a significant factor into foul drawing. Like, you look at Jokic and Embiid, those two draw an insane amount of fouls compared to Karl because they're much more fluid than Karl. And I think that matters. And the other thing with Joel Embiid is Joel Embiid plays in a 4-round-1 offense. Like, all four guys out there around him can shoot threes. So he has much more room to work than Karl does. In the 1 year that Karl truly had a 4-round-1 system, he averaged 27 points on 50, 40, 80 shooting with 11 rebounds, 4.5 assists, and 2 stocks. And that was the year that got cut short because of his wrist injury and COVID in 2019-20. And so, and then obviously, like, you want to look at usage rate, which is the percentage of possessions that end either in that player shooting, getting an assist, or turning it over. Embiid's usage rate is 39%, which, if it's not the highest in NBA history, it's right there with Harden and Houston. And Karl's only at 27%. So that certainly matters as well. But yeah, I just think the way that Embiid uses his body is much more efficient and effective than how Karl uses it, you know, independent of, you know, the way that they play the game.
All right, we end every show like this. We predict the week. Wolves going on the road, at Wizards tonight, at Nets tomorrow, at Spurs, at Thunder. 3 teams well below 500, and then a big one on the road in OKC. Predict the week, Ben Beacon.
Yeah, I'm going to go 4-0. I think the back-to-back is the biggest. Honestly, I think they'll win in OKC. I mean, I still like the matchup, and they're going to want to get one back, not lose that tiebreaker on the season. So the Nets game is probably the one that I'm a little worried about, but I think they'll go 4-0. Yeah,
I also had 4-0 here. You know, if they heard Ben might be in the building for that Thunder game, so they're going to get a win for him. But yeah, I think, you know, the Wizards game, if you can hold Kyle Kuzma under 21 points, they're going to win the game. That's what's been the trend all year for the Wizards. The Nets, 2-11 last 13, talented team, second night of a back-to-back, but that's a pretty easy travel day. And then the Spurs, again, good matchup for Karl-Anthony Towns. If you throw out that scheduled loss in Phoenix and then, you know, against a healthy Pelicans team when Ant didn't play, they're 9-2 when Karl's the leading scorer in the game. And it's certainly a good matchup for that. And then in that Thunder game, I just think they'll be locked in and ready to go and really eager to kind of put that last game against the Thunder, you know, out of mind, out of sight. So 4-0 for me.
Ron.
This is a tough one. I went 3-1 last week. I think I'm gonna do it again. I'm gonna just go 3-1. I think the Nets and Wizards are winnable. I think between the Spurs and the Thunder, there might be a slip up in there. The Thunder's the number one team right now in the West. I think that's going to have playoff implications. That's going to have playoff feeling. That might be the Western Conference Finals. So that's going to be, ratcheted up a little bit. Chet Holmgren just got his jersey retired. So I'm going to go 3-1.
I'll go 2-2. I think actually, no, I'm sorry. I'm going to go 3-1. I think they are locked in against these worst teams because of what happened against Charlotte. I think they win against the subpar teams, but I also think that OKC on the road is still a really tough game. And I felt like they kind of played the game they needed to play to beat them at home, and they got an inefficient shooting night from OKC. Shea wasn't at his absolute best. They only scored 102 points in the game, and the Wolves still lost. I think that OKC would actually be more likely to have a better offensive performance when they're back at home, and I think the Wolves will have a tough time there. So I'm going to go 3-1 with an OKC loss. Reggie?
I'll go 3-1 too, but funny enough, I think actually that one loss is going to happen at Brooklyn on a second night of a back-to-back. So I think they can go into OKC and beat those guys, especially, with the loss that they just took. I think they'll be motivated to play well and take it to them that night. But I think Brooklyn is going to be tricky with Brooklyn Bridges trying to put Ant in McHale jail, as they say.
I love it. Good show, guys. Covered a lot of ground. Didn't always agree, which I like. I like the differences of opinion. Reggie Wilson, Care 11, Ben Beacon, Locked on Wolves, Jack Borman, Locked on Wolves, Postcast, and Kana Supis, and Ron Johnson, The Ron Johnson Show, and plenty more. I'm Sam Ekstrom. You can find us all on X. We're tweeting. We're debating people about the Wolves. We're complaining when they lose, which I usually do. And we appreciate you watching and listening to Minnesota Basketball Party here on Locked on Sports Minnesota. Talk to you next week for Wolves Talk each Wednesday.